Welcome to this edition of UpFront, a monthly program produced by New Hanover County Schools. I'm Ann David. Each month here on UpFront, Superintendent of Schools Dr. Tim Markley answers direct questions from you, the public, about district-wide issues, accomplishments, and programs. Welcome, Dr. Markley.
And it's good to be back.
Oh yeah, we've got a lot of exciting things that are going on and several things to cover. First thing is the progress on the Young Women's Leadership Academy. I know some parents have kind of heard the rumor about that and wonder where it's going.
Well, first of all, for those who don't know what it is, it's a partnership with community folks who want to start an all-girls academy here in New Hanover County. It's modeled on a successful program in New York and in Texas that's a national model. They are currently raising funds, and we're in discussions with them about facilities and where this will be located. They've done a presentation to our board, so it's moving along, but it's still fairly early in the process.
Okay. Will it be like an application process, do you think?
It would be one of our choice schools where folks would apply to go to it. We would start with one grade and build out, eventually end up at 6th through 12th grade.
Okay, that's really interesting. So we'll have to keep up with that as it moves along.
Yeah.
We have talked about the bond on our other shows, and I just wanted to kind of see if there was anything you wanted to update as far as where that was progressing as well.
No news on the bond. I mean, we're working with the county commissioners. We're still doing some searching for land for where an elementary school would go in the north end of the county. We did hold an event a couple of weeks ago called Walk in My Shoes, which was an opportunity for community leaders to come in and see what was going on in our schools. We got a lot of great feedback from those folks about just the quality of what was happening, and also a lot of discussion about the need for facility upgrades. So if you know somebody who spent that day with us, talk to them about what they saw. There was, I think it was an eye-opener for a lot of our community members.
Well, that's good to know. And also that our parents can also email their county commissioners if they want to encourage to support our schools, I'm sure.
Yes.
Well, the next thing is there's some interesting things going on at Forest Hills Elementary School. Would you like to update us on that?
For those who don't know, Forest Hills is our school that has an elementary immersion program. We currently do that in Spanish. We started in kindergarten several years ago. We have added a grade every year, and now we're up into third grade. But there's been some interest about expanding that to add a second language, Chinese. And so we're going to try to offer a Chinese immersion class next year, beginning with kindergarten. It'll be open to folks in the Forest Hill districts and open to folks outside of the Forest Hill district who would like to enter that program. I would encourage you to contact Deb Greenwood. She's the principal, and she will give you a tour of the school and be happy to talk to you about what that program is going to look like.
So how does that work? How would an immersion class, how's the Spanish worked as well as the Chinese?
Spanish has been very successful. The students basically get all of their instruction in Spanish. And there's some great research from other places about what the benefits of that are for those students moving forward. Those kids tend to outperform other students on standardized tests, and we're giving them a skill they can take with them for the rest of their life.
Is it just open to the students that are districted to Forest Hills, or is it also like an open enrollment?
We will offer it to the folks in Forest Hills, and if there are other slots, we'll offer it to those folks who are outside of the school district or outside of the attendance zone for Forest Hills.
So it'd be like an open enrollment.
It would be an open
type
enrollment
situation. All right. Well, that's very interesting. I'm sure that parents will be contacting.
We're excited about the opportunity.
Oh yeah, that's such an opportunity for our elementary school students to learn something while they're very young.
Well, you think about where we are here in North Carolina and the world. We're located on the coast, and Wilmington's a major port. We have folks who come in here from all over the world, and a lot of our businesses have those kinds of international contacts, and it will just make our schools more competitive, and I think it'll make our students more competitive.
Absolutely. The next thing that is on a lot of parents' minds, as well as I'm sure administration and teachers as well, are the situation with teachers and retention and tenure and all that situation, since we spoke about that when we had our show that covered some legislative changes.
Well, it'd be impossible if you follow education not to know about some of those things that are going on. But when you think about teacher tenure, the state has abolished tenure, and they implemented a 25% bonus for about 25% of our teachers who have tenure in order to get them to give it up early. And there's been a lot of controversy around that. We're going to focus more on testing today, but at some point we'll bring in Dr. Welmers and we'll have a more in-depth discussion. But we're concerned because of what it's done in terms of teacher morale. Teachers haven't had a significant pay increase in over 5 years, and we're starting to see that effect on retention. We see a lot of our best teachers leaving the profession. We see talking to folks at the university, they're telling us that the freshman enrollments in education courses are down considerably, as much as 50% in some universities. And so my concern is not necessarily today, but 3, 4, 5 years down the road, as a lot of our veteran teachers retire, are we going to have the high quality candidates to replace those teachers in the classroom? We've done a lot of damage to the educational profession, and we need to work to restore the value of our teachers in our community. You look at our state pay scale is one of the worst in the country, in the bottom tier. When you look at the actual adjusted growth for teachers, it's been negative in the last 10 years. So we've got a lot of work to do to restore confidence in the profession to the outside, and to make sure that those teachers, who are the backbone of what happens in our school, are fairly compensated.
Do you foresee anything we can do locally? I know the big picture rotates around what the state can do, but is there anything we can do locally to make this a better situation?
Well, we currently offer a local supplement, which is 8%, but that's not competitive with other cities. When you look at Charlotte, Wake, and some of the other places, they offer a much higher local supplement to offset the state salary. So a conversation with our county commissioners about that local supplement would go a long way towards mitigating some of the damage, I think, from the state in terms of what they've done to teacher salaries. Because if you started in this profession 5 years ago, you're making the same exact salary as you did 5 years ago. And it's tough to keep these young, talented people in a profession where they're not seeing any growth.
Absolutely, and I know that most of them were pursuing a master's degree, which gave them an increase in pay, but that has also been removed.
The state eliminated the additional pay for masters, and so there's now no incentive to go on to continue to build and hone your skills through more education. I'm hoping in the legislative session you'll see a reversal on that, and I'm hoping in the legislative session you'll see a significant increase for teachers. But when I see former teacher of the years leaving the profession, when I see teachers holding down a second and third job just to make ends meet, that really concerns me about what that will do to our students long term.
And I know the next question is fresh in the news, and that is the lawsuit against vouchers. I know that was a great blow to public school system when the vouchers came into effect. But.
Well, vouchers, there's the amount of money that's scheduled for vouchers this year isn't huge, but it's that foot in the door thing that concerns me about how that will open it up, and what the message that sends to other people is we're taking public dollars, giving them to private schools and telling them you don't have to operate by the same set of rules that we do. We're going to assess our students, we're going to assess our teachers, but we're not doing that with these dollars. So we're giving public dollars to private schools and not asking for any accountability as part of that process. That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
No. Well, we have a few more questions before we wrap up this segment. One of those is the situation with volunteers. I know there were a lot of parents that were upset about volunteers being more restricted in our schools, but did you have an update on that for the parents?
Well, when you look at our volunteer, we've rewrote our volunteer handbook. We've and restructured somewhat our volunteer program. And to be honest, this truly only affected the volunteers who worked in the office area. For those who were in the classrooms, for those who were doing field trips, for those who were working with booster clubs, there hasn't been any real significant change. So for 95% of our volunteers who do that kind of work, there wasn't a huge change in what was happening. We had concerns in the office area because there's a lot of privacy rules around FERPA, HIPAA, and in other areas, and we wanted to make sure that we were protecting the confidentiality of our student information. And in today's world where there are some custody situations that can be very strained, we wanted to make sure that we weren't putting parents in a situation where they may have access to information that they shouldn't have. And the schools have made some adjustments in where their parents are volunteering. Some have relocated them to the media center. Some have isolated that parent area a little more in terms of that access. If you call a school and a parent answers the phone, they're going to identify themselves as a parent volunteer up front. The second part of this is just in an era of safety is we're going to begin in January 1st a more extensive background process for volunteers who may be in situations where they're going to be alone with students. And so we're instituting a volunteer background check for those high-level volunteers who are going to be in those kinds of situations. And once you have the background check, it'll be in place for 3 years. So check with your schools about if you're a person who's going to who would qualify to be as part of that. And we're still seeing more volunteers. Watchdogs is really growing at our elementary and middle schools, bringing those dads in. So our change in volunteer policy isn't meant to exclude parents, but but more so to protect them and to protect students as it relates to that confidential information.
And I think parents have begun to see that in the situation that have happened in schools nationwide, that some changes in our volunteers probably were necessary just for the protection of the students. One thing before we go to break is some very happy news for Laney High School and for our school district.
We have our Teacher of the Year last year is Melissa Gillespie, and she is a phenomenal teacher out at Laney High School, and she was just recognized as the Regional Teacher of the Year. And that means she will go on to compete with other teachers from around the state to be the State Teacher of the Year. We think she's excellent. For us, she is a State Teacher of the Year, but we fully expect her to be very competitive with those other teachers around the state, and look forward to announcing at some point that she's our State Teacher of the Year.
Well, that's exciting. Hopefully we can announce that on our next show, and it's good to hear that they've got so much success at Laney and for our school district as well. Now we're going to go to a break, but joining us when we come back will be Karen Green, Director of Teaching and Accountability, as she joins us to talk about the 2012-2013 Ready Data Assessment Report. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
This financial advisor is being accused of committing one of the largest investment frauds in the history of the United States.
I guess we're not going to Aspen. That's fine. You see, I like tennis balls. He likes insider trading. So he's going to jail and I'm going to a shelter. And no, they're not the same thing. Shelters are for good pets that want to be adopted. Jails are for criminals. I've done nothing. Uh-oh. Ooh, okay, I stole a cheeseburger once. I'm a dog.
Welcome back to UpFront with the Superintendent. This month on UpFront, we're taking a look at the results of the New Hanover County Schools' recently released 2012-2013 Ready Data Assessment Report. Joining us for all the details is Karen Green, Director of Testing and Accountability. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you.
We're glad to have you here on UpFront. Now, there were big changes last year with the testing. Can you go over the changes and what's really happened with testing?
Yes, the changes that occurred in testing occurred as a result of the changes in the curriculum. And this was the first time since we implemented testing that we changed the curriculum in all areas in 1 year. We have new standards for math, for science, for reading, for social studies. And it's been difficult to provide all the professional development needed, but the teachers have been very rigorously participating. The challenge for the students is that the assessments and the curriculum standards are much more rigorous. For example, in English language arts, there's a lot more primary source reading, nonfiction reading, a lot of writing to justify primary source documents, and students are having to use different types of texts that are really quite difficult to read.
And what prompted the change? Did they just because of the curriculum, or are they just ramping up things all the way around?
That's a good question. Originally, when we started testing, we began in 1996, and the emphasis was really on the ABCs, they called it. Right. That was our accountability model.
And I think parents remember that was the mantra back then, were the ABCs.
Right, and the B standard for basic education, making sure that all children could read and write and compute and mathematics. And now the emphasis is really on more than just going from one grade to the next. The emphasis is really on being career and college ready, making sure that when we graduate students that they're ready to move to the next level. And thus we had to revise the curricula to make sure that those standards met those higher standards for what's required in career and in college these days.
I'm sure that has posed some challenges, not only for the students, but as you were mentioning, for the teachers as well. What are some of the challenges you've seen so far with this?
Well, anytime we change the curriculum, we have to provide professional development, and so we have been trying to provide different types of professional development. There have been face-to-face professional development, online professional development, and then also in all of our schools, teachers are forming small learning communities where they're focusing on curriculum and teaching and instruction together as a group.
Now, just to jump back a little bit, what are the major changes parents would realize between the way children have been tested up till last year and this new system? what are some things that parents might need to know for their children as far as the big changes?
One of the things that parents may notice is, especially in mathematics, oftentimes we've been used to just assigning 10 or 15 problems a night that really just required computation. Now students are going to be given scenarios and problems to solve that may require more than just basic computation. And it may require more strands in mathematics, if you will. You may find in algebra there may be some geometric problems. There may be some spacing problems that students will have to solve. And they'll have to really synthesize, put together a lot of information in order to come out with a solution. And there may be more than one strategy that you can use to find the answer. And I think that's a big change, because when we were in school, everyone solved the problems the same way. And now we can arrive at the same answer with different strategies.
So it's not just solving the problem, but it's almost application.
It is. It's application. And a lot of it is focused on process too, trying to make sure that we teach children to think about how they're thinking and what strategies they're using on their own, and try to help them improve those strategies.
And what are some of the teachers finding that the issues are in teaching the children this new way?
That there's a lot more time that's required to spend on a certain standard. It used to be with the old standards, we could cover maybe a standard in a couple days. We're finding now that teachers are spending more time on a standard, because the standards are requiring that we go deeper and broader.
Okay. And do they feel like the students are receiving this well, or as far as their preparedness, do they feel like the students are rising to meet the challenge, I guess?
Yes, and we have a really good system in place, a formative assessment system that teachers use. It's an online system. So after they teach a large chunk, students can participate in a small formative assessment that will really give teachers item analysis data to see if those students are hitting all the targets.
Oh, that's good. So as they go along?
Yes, as they go along.
Now, something that we haven't covered is, does this just hit elementary, middle school? Who are the kids that are involved in this new data?
The curriculum changed in K-12.
Okay, so it's all the way through to high school.
Yes, and it's challenging, especially for teachers that teach more than one subject, because they had to learn the new standards in 2 years.
Now I know, so these changes came in what parents will perceive are the end of grade tests.
Yes.
Okay, and for high school?
The end of course tests as well.
But the end of course is different from the new common exams that I know some of our high school parents are familiar with.
That's correct. Common exams are called North Carolina final exams now. They started out as measures of student learning, then they called them common exams, and now we're calling them North Carolina final exams. They're official North Carolina exams designed for courses for which we don't have an end of course test. So for example, our old end of course EOCs, we test in algebra, which is Math 1 now, biology, and English 2. But now we have other North Carolina final exams for Earth Environmental Science, for Math 3, for English 1, and those are also administered during exam week.
Right. But they're separate from what we're talking about today.
Yes, they're separate from what we're talking about today. The students do receive an exam score just like they do on the EOC.
Just before we go on, what is the evaluative part between the end of course tests and the common exams? The end of course test the student's knowledge, but the end result of the data is different. And the common exams or the final exams, the data is used to assess not only the student, but
That's correct. The data is reported for different reasons, but both types of exams cover the standards.
Right.
As a former secondary math and science teacher, to have the state create an exam for me, that would have saved me a lot of time a long time ago if the state had produced those final exams for us. For the EOC exams that were traditionally given, that's for accountability reporting. That's how statewide leaders and school leaders know how our students are doing in biology, Math 1, and English 2. Right. The North Carolina final exam data is used to gauge how well teachers are covering the standards in the classroom.
Gotcha. So that's the big difference in those two for the high school level. All right, well, we've covered all the basics. So now we're going to go to break, and when we come back, we'll focus in on the results for 2012.
We'll talk a little bit about the data.
Yep, and figure out how we're doing and where we're going. All right, now don't go away. We've got more questions and more explanations from Ms. Green when she returns, and we'll take a close look at the results of the data assessment report. But first, if you have a question you want the superintendent to answer about our school system, we've got the information for you right now. So get out a pen and paper and jot down these details.
If you would like to have your questions about issues relating to our school system answered by Dr. Markley, then visit our school system's website at www.nhcs.net and click on the Parent tab, and then click on the Superintendent on the left side of the screen. There you will find a submission form for your questions. You can also send your questions by mail to New Hanover County Schools, attention UpFront, 6410 Carolina Beach Road, Wilmington, North Carolina, 28412.
Pop quiz. Who had the eye of the tiger? What horse did Seabiscuit beat? Who showed who the money? In what game is there no crying? And by the way, what game did your kid play at recess today?
Know what really matters. Know about your kid's school and know about your kid. Find out 100 ways to know more, do more.
Welcome back to UpFront. Joining us this month is Karen Green, Director of Testing and Accountability. And we're going to be looking now at the data from the Ready Data Assessment Report, which is involving the testing that our students take at the end of each school year. Now, how do the data results look for us since the testing results are in?
This is our first year with a new curriculum and a new assessment. We've got a chart to show you that gives our overall performance as a district. And since this is our baseline year, this is the first year we test the new assessments, we really need to stick with comparing ourselves against how the state did versus other urban districts as well as some of our neighboring counties. And if you look at the chart, you'll notice that New Hanover County Schools perform very well. We're not where we want to be, but for baseline, we're doing very well.
That's good. And so what types of measures are generally reported with this?
We have another chart to show you an additional accountability model. There are proficiency and growth data. Proficiency data really shows the percentage of students that, if you will, passed the assessment. When we talk about passing tests, passing assessments, we're really talking about proficiency. It's the number, the percentages of students that were proficient. The previous chart showed that overall 53% were proficient on the assessments. And then we also talk about growth, because you can't talk about meeting the standard and passing the assessment without talking about growth. Are we growing children? Sometimes a child may not be proficient on the assessment, but the children are showing growth.
So they've made growth in their particular area.
From one year to the next. They may not quite be proficient yet. And so those are two data points that really have to be analyzed at the same time.
So with the data we're seeing now, we won't necessarily see growth until this year's data comes in.
Right. Well, we did have, the state was able to calculate growth, even though the assessments changed, because the growth is really based on the child's relative position in a line compared to other students across the state. So the thought is, if the child maintains his position from year to year, then they met the growth. Yes. If they go up in position compared to other students, they've exceeded growth. And then, of course, if they lose tracking in their position, then they don't meet the growth expectation.
Oh, that's good to know, because a lot of parents, when we have a baseline year, they kind of discount it because they feel like everything's changed. But from what you're saying, they've set the standard in place where they can actually judge from where the child was the year before.
Yes, and that's one of the good things about the parent reports that went out late in November, because the scores were delayed. Normally we send the individual student reports home to parents in June with report cards. But if parents will note that two pieces of important data on the parent report reported Lexiles and Quantiles, and that has to do with the reading level for Lexiles and the Quantiles, the math level. And those are on a linear scale. meaning if the numbers go higher, the student is improving. And so those, especially with the Lexile for reading, that's an important data point, because when you're trying to advise students in picking book selections and things of that nature, you want to make sure that you're challenging your child and making sure that they're reading at least at their Lexile.
So how did our district do in math and reading and science? Is science included in that?
Yes. In grades 3 through 8, we tested math, reading, and science. And because this is a baseline, you'll note on the chart that in reading, which we now call English Language Arts across the board, in grades 3 through 8, we were above the state again, second only to Wake County when compared to other school districts, urban school districts, and then some of our regional districts. And in math, again, above the county and above the state, excuse me, and second only to Wake County.
That's very good then. So our students are progressing, and
they are,
and doing well.
They are, and we expect improvement this year. In science, we're above some other urban school districts as well as the state, and of course our region. And then in science, we're not where we need to be, but we are above the state.
Yeah. So that takes care of elementary and middle. Now, how about our high school students? How did they fare in their end of course test?
We have another chart to show you how we did on the end of course test, and if you'll note that we are above the state on all 3 measures, second only to Wake in math 1 and English 2. I will note that English 2 was a new assessment this year. Previously in high school we tested in English 1, which was primarily in 9th grade. Now the English test the state test is in 10th grade.
Okay. And also with high school, we know that there are other measures that they use to check student performance and growth. And could you speak about those just for a little bit?
Yes. We talked earlier about the ABC model, the old accountability model that really focused on a basic education. Now our model is called the READY model, and it's really trying to get children ready for career and college. So we have some additional measures. One of the measures is the ACT. That's a national test, and that all high school juniors participate in. And I'm happy to report that 66.5% of our high school juniors met the minimum UNC entrance requirements as a junior. And that's really telling us that our children are moving in the right direction. They're on target for college. We also have another measure called the Algebra 2 math course rigor. The state also requires that we calculate the percentage of graduates that actually successfully completed Algebra 2, and 95.6% of our students did that, which is well above some other urban districts in the state.
Thanks for all that great information. And now if you'd like further information, check on the school system's website, and there's full details with all the information we've covered today, plus lots more to answer all your questions. Well, that wraps up this edition of UpFront. Look for a new edition of our program each month of the traditional school year right here on the Learning Network of the Cape Fear, Time Warner Cable Channel 5 and Charter Cable Channel 12. On behalf of Dr. Markley and the staff here at NHCS TV, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next month for another edition of UpFront with the Superintendent.